Welcome to Impossible Bodies.
Hello, good people. Welcome back, or maybe I'm welcoming you for the first time today. This is our second event of the second day of Impossible Bodies. So we started yesterday with our opening, and I hope you already had a look at the virtual environment, our exhibition experience. I would highly recommend to go there and also join our cantina to hang out with other cyborgs. But first things first, we talk about games. Why games? On crossovers between mixed reality, games and art. And so this is a panel discussion, and moderator is Ine Gevers. So welcome, Ine. I will put you
Thank you.
On for a second. There you are. So the floor is yours, Ine.
Thank you, Coralie, and welcome, Zuraida, Yassine, Malcolm, and Rami. Dear audience, please use the function to ask your questions, the chat function to ask your questions. You can do that during this panel. And the session will be a bit shorter than announced. We'll end at 7:35. My short introduction. Although the art world has some exemplary artists leading the charge when it comes to crossovers between art and mixed reality games like Harun Farocki, Hito Steyerl, and Cheng, there's still an enormous gap between the disciplines from an institutional perspective. Impossible Bodies also has some mixed reality games related works like Symbiosis of Polymorf, a VR work that includes actually all senses, taste, smell, and proprioception, and Simon Senn's Be Arielle F, which will be the next program of this evening. It's a co-creative theater piece with the audience to discover the ethical limits of using other people's bodies now that we can buy digital twins online cheap and fast. That is why we have this panel today to talk about the possible crossovers, the second day of Impossible Bodies. As we all live now several lives and simultaneously as digital twins, the role of games and of gamification and the use of virtual habitats for the best become more crucial every minute. I would like to introduce the speakers of today. I just mentioned the names Zuraida Bouter, Yassine Karmoudi, Malcolm Kratz, and Rami Ismail. And we will start a short introduction, and I'll give the word to Zuraida first, just a moment. Zuraida, fresh winner of the Game Changer reward by Indicade. Let's start with you. We have worked together before for Hacking Habitats, so I know you, and I know you as a co-founder of the Playful Arts Festival. But since then, a lot has happened, so please take the floor.
Am I there? Cool. Hi, thanks for the introduction. And yes, I'm Zuraida. I'm a playful culture curator, which basically means that I curate exhibitions and programs around games and play. And I've been doing that for quite some time. And I'm just gonna quickly run through some things that I've done in the past, just to give you an idea of my background and how this relates to the topic at hand. Let's see. So I started in 2003 as an intern for a game exhibition called Gamescapes, and we used some of the things within the games, the environments and things like that, to show to the people, but then also had some things that were more physical, so had more physical interaction with the games or with the installations that were there. And then ended this year with, or not ended, but the last thing I did was Amaze Digital, which meant that we had to bring everything online like every other festival out there. And I created a little program with talks and cooking sessions and all kinds of different things for people to connect with each other around games. Like I said, Playful Arts Festival, I set that up together with Iris Peters in Den Bosch in 2012. And it's all about playing and connecting and discovering with each other. And it's in physical space. We like to bring people together there. And we did that in different ways. We always had a little theme, collaborative play in 2012. And you can see it's very physical already. It was meant to bring people together around playing games. We also tried bringing people outside. No, I don't really have pictures of that, but with the theme urban play, we tried to get people outside and play with the environment and with each other. But also inside, we had a little exhibition. And here you can see my actual background that I have. This was by Ebner Price, an installation where you could just hop down and jump in a frog suit and hop up and down in this relaxing space. But there were also cardboard mazes where people could hang out and chat with each other, but also still play. And then there was also a spotter by Fresco Amsterdam, which meant that you were playing with your body and dancing, which meant that it was a really lovely installation. People were just really into dancing due to the installation, and it didn't look around anymore, but like focused with the body on their dancing acts. We took that further with the festival Bodies at Play theme in 2016. We really wanted to have people play with their bodies and exercise a little, which was fun. And then in 2018, we tried to bring people in the here and now through different kinds of installations to choreographed tours throughout the city of Den Bosch. And here you can see Bodies in Urban Spaces by Willy Dorner, which was really fun to see and do. But we also had students doing some stuff where we where you got to smash things, which is really nice. So it's bodily interaction again. And this is an installation by Moluke van der Vlucht. And you can all look this up if you're interested. I'm just gonna go like quickly through this. But I'm also doing not only Playful Arts Festival, but also curating for other festivals. This was Incubate Arcade in Tilburg. We got to do that twice. One was about music and games, where we also had like people, composers from the games made music live while people could play the games. And in 2016, we were able to do another one, and we were more about physical interaction and about alternative controllers. So normally you play a game with a controller and it's complicated, but this time we had these controllers that were a little bit different. So here you could pick your nose, for example, in this face mask. And here you could jump up and down on a big trampoline while playing this game, which is a very physical exercise. And here you had to roll over the floor. And here you were able to smooch with each other, but with a little, you had to lick a little pacifier and then try to get the same rhythm as the other, which was very physical and very scary to do. But actually, even though there's a little bit of a distance between you, there is still, the distance is like super small all of a sudden. So that was a bit of alternative controllers. And then I got also to do a screen shake in Antwerp, where I got to make a lovely room together with Pieter Bostoen, and where we tried to bring games, like world from the games, inside the real world, like this one from Lieve Oma, where you play in the woods. And this was also like a sort of sensory installation. And here, this is a VR installation by Sonic Picnic and Lizzie Wanders, where you were playing or perceiving your birth in a VR installation. And I try to make you comfortable by lying on a bed and things like that. So this is really short stuff that I've been doing in the past 10, 15 years. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Zoraida. Yes, next one in line, Yassine. Yassine, are you there? Yassine is not there at the moment.
Yes, I'm here.
You are? Good, good, good. We don't see you, Yassine. Is that possible?
My camera is on.
Yeah, you are there now.
Yes, okay.
Perfect, Yassine. Yeah, we have met shortly as you were representing Submarine as a member of the jury for the AKV St. Joost students who joined the Impossible Bodies competition for the best AR works related to the theme. And citizens of the city of Den Bosch can watch these via QR codes during the festival week. So please share with me the importance of storytelling.
Yeah, well, let me introduce myself. I'm Yassine Komoudi. I'm a storyteller and impact manager at Submarine Channel. Submarine Channel is a production house and a platform for digital storytelling. Submarine Channel has been founded in 2001 by Bruno Felix and Femke Wolting. And back then they wanted to explore their narrative possibilities in the digital domain. We're talking about 2001 and the internet was still a very new thing back then. So on one hand, we are producing interactive and immersive animation, documentaries, games, motion comics, and VR pieces. And on the other hand, we also have an editorial site and platform where we write and keep track on the newest things in the immersive and interactive fields where we work in. And yeah, the importance of storytelling. As a storyteller myself, I always consider myself as a storytelling extremist, and especially with someone with my name and an Arabic name. That's kind of a scary thing to say. But what do I mean with the storytelling extremist? Is, you know, we grow up with stories, and stories are the fundamental thing for people to connect to one another. And not only with people, but also with brands, products, services. And I really think if we can find out a really nice way to tell our stories, we are better to present ourselves and to connect with other people. So that's in short of who I am and why I think storytelling is so important.
Thank you so much, Yassine. Next in line, Malcolm Katz. I think I need to wait a second.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Malcolm.
We're gonna switch the screens still, I guess, yeah. Yes.
Hi, Malcolm.
Hello.
So I have had the honor of collaborating with you on a new project together for the last year. And you introduce yourself as a tech fanatic amongst so many other talents, such as the most excellent educational curator that I have ever met. Please tell us where you come from and how games could help us to become more media literate and other 21st century skills without which we might not survive the next century.
Yeah, so maybe let's start with a small introduction. I started as a fine artist, very interested in the digital world, making a lot of video works, but also programming, writing a bot that would write its own poetry, and yeah, getting more and more into games. I was creating like small games where you would actually have to break the rules to actually win the game, which normally was like competitive games where you had to break the rules and cooperate to actually be able to get to the end. This continued. I've been an organizer in the climate movement for a long time. And back then we had some problems with organizing really big events, but then the police trying to like obscure or like block these events from happening. So there we started using games, and this is maybe also like how games can change our society. It was called the Climate Games. We created this like a trial in the harbor in Amsterdam before the climate summit in Paris. And the thing was that we just made an announcement for disobedient actions happening in and around the city. But we as organizers just released a website where people would have a map on their smartphone. They could stream pictures and videos of their actions. But we as organizers didn't know at all what was happening, only when the pictures started coming in. So if one of us would be arrested or taken by police, we weren't able to inform them about what was gonna happen where. So it was like an AR game in the sense of teams could follow each other on the map. They could do actions, show videos live online. And in the end, there were, I think, 300 different groups doing, or 300 different actions taking place around Paris and Amsterdam. Yeah, and of course, now I'm working with Ine. I turned myself into education, and now I'm an education curator at a small cultural institution in Rotterdam called A Tale of a Tub. And I'm working on yeah, a new project for together with Ine. And
You can tell, Project Q.
Yeah, Project Q.
Queering systems.
Yeah, so I identify as well, gender non-conforming. I switch and swap a lot with my gender, and I've been very focused on intersectionality because of that. I'm also on the autistic spectrum, so that's another, well, for some handicap, or like, I don't see it like this, I see it as a very great power. But intersectionality and looking at different perspectives on same, like artworks, for example, is our focus for this project with, for Project Q, to really look in different ways to the same systems and the same structures that we have in place. Yeah.
Thank you, Malcolm. The last one is Rami Ismail. Rami, yeah, I need to wait for a moment.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Rami. So nice to meet you, Rami.
A pleasure.
I know about you already. Thanks for joining us. I have been following you for some time. We discussed that a bit a week ago, and I had now the pleasure, of course, meeting you for the first time in person, digitally in person.
Right.
You earned worldwide recognition with the game studio Vlambeer, and you have won several awards for games such as Ridiculous Fishing and Nuclear Throne. Also advocating for a fairer and more equal industry through your work as the game development world has your ongoing attention. How can independent game developers help stir the game industry towards equally important goals besides big business, money-wise?
Right. So for context, I'm Rami Ismail. I'm a bit more of a traditional game designer compared to the other panelists who do incredible work in their own spaces. My games are mostly about explosions. That said, I am also a Twitch streamer and event organizer. And over the past 10 years, because of the success of our games, I've had the fortune of traveling around the world, meeting developers everywhere, even in places where people normally wouldn't consider there's a games industry. And I've gotten to learn and see a lot of the beautiful work that's happening around the world. And for me, games have always been fascinating. I grew up Dutch Egyptian. And one of the things that I always found strange is that I would always play games where I played characters in which I looked like my Dutch friends, and I would always defeat people that looked like my Egyptian friends. That never bothered me as a kid, but as I grew up, I started to wonder if maybe that was bad. And then I realized that, yes, that is bad. Because games have this unique ability to connect people, even across language barriers or cultural barriers, right? It doesn't really matter where you're from. If you kick a ball at each other, or you throw a ball at each other, or you play a game of, Fall Guys, it doesn't matter where you're from or what you speak. You're now connecting with these people in a very personal, friendly way. So I've always strongly believed that games are sort of a connective human tissue. I think they've been that from the very start of our species, when we were just, like starting to walk. And before we even had language, I think the people that would throw a rock at a tree just to practice, they would be better at throwing a rock at a predator or at a prey. And I think that playfulness and the want to play just kind of evolved into our species because it is good for our survival, it's good for our mental health, it's good for our body. And I think a lot of the examples the other panelists gave really emphasize that. What I love about indie games, though, is that because they are so much smaller and so much more intimate, that they inherently communicate and portray more of the creator's background and identity. And the games that I've seen around the world, some of them are ideas or game designs or narratives or mythologies, musics, visuals that I've just never seen before, and I wouldn't be able to connect with as easily if they were a book or a movie. But now I am a character in that culture, acting out the things they find important. Sometimes entirely new game designs appear. There's this incredible game called Farsh from Iran, which is about rolling up and down a carpet. And it's not, it has this beautiful puzzle mechanic that I've never seen before about connecting tiles, and it would take too much time to properly explain it. But I just, suffice to say that in my decade as a game developer and in my 30 years as a game enthusiast, I'd never seen that mechanic before. And a random kid from Iran, a very talented game designer, don't get me wrong, just came up with this new mechanic while we're having discussions here about whether all mechanics have been exhausted or not, which is a ridiculous discussion. So for me, independent games actually exemplify the idea of games as not necessarily business. A lot of indie developers still somewhat begrudgingly accept that they have to be a business. But I think the beauty of the medium sort of expresses itself well the way it is now, where business is absolutely a consideration, but because the works are so personal and so singular in their creation, they still express so much of the person behind it. And to me, that is wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was absolutely a yes to the question that that these different game developers, indie game developers, really can contribute, to a much more democratization of games and gaming, at least, because yes, it's absolutely true. Games and gaming is, of course, as old as human beings are. My first question to you all has to do with the influence of games, and especially then gamification, a term that we all know, and whether that has been changing our world and living environment, because it has been, of course, rapidly. But what could you see, all of you, as the pros and cons of gamification? So who wants first?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we going to rock, paper, scissors for this one?
Okay, so I start. Yeah, it's well, we see gamification happening more and more throughout so many, getting running streaks in even in the meditation app I use, there's a running streak of how many days I earn points with this. Or one of the things I noticed with gamification, not necessarily in how I see it used in the school system in the Netherlands. But for example, with these running streaks for like online courses that I'm doing in programming or my meditation app, it keeps me motivated to keep going. Like I get a reminder of like, oh, you didn't do this thing today yet. There are some dangers to it as well, which I mostly see in elementary schools, for example, where I was a research teacher, also in high schools, but in elementary schools, they use this app called Dojo, where like the first kids that's silent in classroom gets more points than the rest of the kids in the classroom. If kids don't talk through the teacher, they get points like taken off their score for that day, and they have like runner-ups for the week. And it's a very controlling way of like it's a stimulus because kids get points for the tasks that they do, and like they try to gather more points by doing more like cleaning the classroom or like helping out the teacher even more. But at the same time, it's a very tricky way because it's a very controlling way of like, oh, if you're not silent or you talk through me as a teacher, you get minus points on your score. It's like, it's very, yeah, it could be very dangerous, I think.
Yeah, I think the thing to consider with gamification is that really it's sort of a structure or a tool in which we have the ability to help create certain behaviors, right? And in that regard, gamification itself isn't positive or negative.
Yeah.
It is a method of achieving certain behaviors, and I think when you just look at behavioral science, the idea of rewarding people, even with things that aren't necessarily concrete or things that they would not have access to before, just the idea of a reward is a very powerful way of dealing with human behavior and shaping human behavior. So in that regard, like obviously it has very good implications. You can create good behaviors, you can create good rituals, and it has less great potential where it can be used to create sort of addiction loops or feedback loops that might be more harmful or negative. And I think the very best example we have of this is probably just social media, which has a lot of gamification applied to it. Your likes, your follows, your responses, your comments, like it's effectively a video game. And it has driven some wonderful things where people share beautiful, wonderful art and music, reach people that they've never reached before. On the flip side, you know, democracy is on fire and, you know, the world is ending. And that might be a less positive response from this whole system. So it is a tool that we're grappling with, that we're trying to figure out, I think, as a field, as an industry. And we've gotten really good at it, and now we're kind of like, okay, we might have gotten too good at this. Let's go back and see if this is actually like smart and ethical and moral, which is a very tech approach to issues.
Thank you, Rami. So yeah, in that sense, you know, it's a combination. It's actually like technology. You know, it's a tool that as soon as it is used by humans and other actors, you know, it can, you know, go in different directions. That is what I hear you say also about gamification. Zuraida, I saw you, you know, like reacting facially, so please go.
Oh, I do it on streams too.
Yeah,
facially. Yeah, no, I think gamification can have different ways of, yeah, of being good, but also being bad. I think everyone said it already a little bit. I think what's the most important part is to not forget about the humans in this sense. So, and technology-wise and gamification, sometimes even like with scoring the points and all of that, if you just do it as that, like scoring the points, it's not really an intrinsic way of getting people to do some things. So it's really, I really hope that with gamification, people can think about the human way of doing it instead of just the scoring point things. And there's several different examples how it's done well and how that's done the opposite side. But yeah, I feel like technology is definitely, and games in that sense also definitely have to keep in mind the human.
Thank you, Yasin.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's more. I don't think that gamification alone is changing the world. I think gamification has always been there. You've always been rewarded for doing good things without games. But what I see, especially since the pandemic, games is having, especially when I look at my own environment. For instance, I was playing Among Us with my cousins just 2 weeks ago, and we used Zoom to keep in touch with each other's in times where the pandemic holds us from meeting. But I also think gaming, and especially in terms of storytelling, teaches us a lot about other cultures and about other people. It learns us to emphasize to see things from another perspective. And that's also why I think, and I totally agree with Rami, what he said earlier on, that when he was young and he was, guys like him were always the bad guys. And that's also a really incentive for us and for the industry to further diversify and to put it on top of our list, because I think that's truly the most important thing to do right now, to make sure that the stories and the voices of people who are not heard before should be heard now. And I think that would far beyond gamifications and games itself. I think that's the true essence of who we are as humans, to learn from each other and to listen to each other's stories. So,
Rami?
Yeah, Rami.
Yeah, I just also wanted to emphasize that Zoraida's point is extremely valuable here. Like, it's really easy, especially for me as a programmer, to just look at things as technological systems. And obviously, I'm a game developer. I understand that the human perspective is a large part of what I'm creating for. But it is so critical for us to properly understand how humans behave, how humans interact. And I think we tend to just get really good at something, and then, like I said earlier, kind of work our way backwards to the human impact and the human potential of that. It's also why it's important that these spaces are just filled with people with different perspectives, different ideas on what is valuable, what is wonderful, what is dangerous. And yeah, our industry has traditionally not been super good at that, and we are trying to work on that. But gamification plays into so many larger forces of society nowadays that it becomes a really hard topic to discuss. And I think as long as as the writer said, we bring it back to the human part of that, we might be fine, right?
Yeah. So actually, in relation to this also, I remember reading, I think it's 10 years ago already, Joost Raadsens on this, making clear that, of course, one of the problems of games is that the reward system also alienates, because it goes very quick with the badges and the trophies and the points. And of course, real life is much more, how would you say that, stickier or slower, etc. So, in that sense, that it might be that people sometimes think that they can change or influence the world as quickly as they could in a game. So what could be the role, for instance, of art and related institutions as museums in that matter? Could there also be a positive role in opening up also in terms of the reward system?
I think, for example, one thing we're also working on with Project Q, which will be a mixed reality exhibition. I play a lot with VR and AR tech, and I think like one to the change of perspective is something that games can bring really well. You really can be in the skin of someone else or of something else. And talking about like ways of being like scoring points or like getting any kind of trophy, badges or anything. I think the change of perspective itself could be a way of earning the points, like being able to that's rewarding, could be rewarding in itself. And I think especially in the art world, especially museums, which tend to still work from a way of like the institution knows everything. We just broadcast information to the visitor. You get a booklet at the entrance. It explains what the work means and how you should read it and how you should look at it, what it's made from, like very, very sterile information. I always call it, like it's very impersonal. One thing, I've played this VR experience where I'm also experimenting with some friends called Where Thoughts Go. And it's this experience where you get like very tough life questions. It starts kind of playful and cute, like what did you want to be in life when you were smaller? And then at one point it's around death and like losing loved ones, and the whole point of this experience is you have these light bulbs hanging around, and when you touch them, you hear voice recordings of people answering this question, and you can record your own voice message for other people to hear. And what I could see, for example, in a museum would be an AR or a digital way of sharing voice memos with artworks, or like in this VR space that we're creating for Project Q, where you can literally, even though you're further apart from each other, you can share your different perspectives and use that kind of as the gratifying part of the game, like being able to hear those stories and taking on those different skins or glasses or perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody else?
No. Okay. Yes, Rami.
I might be a bit radical in this one, but I kind of believe that it's not just what museum, like what games, how games should be to fit in a museum. I also just believe that we're at a point where we need museums to figure out how they can fit games. There's been some really interesting work being done there across the world.
Yeah.
But if we can't put some of our best indie games from the past few years into a museum, then that's a museum problem, not a games problem. And it's, I mean, we have on this panel people that have done incredible work in showcasing games and creating interesting like context and places to play these games. Like if we can do it at events, then surely we can do it in a museum. So
yeah.
Well, it's an ignored field in the art world for sure. Like we were also talking about like with Ina for Project Q, like even maybe being able to play parts or see other people stream, like for example a game like Detroit Become Human, which is like this really big production, but to discuss like human rights and like and there are many smaller games that work with this as well, but to pull this gaming industry, even like bigger and indie games, into the arts, because it is art, and it's like I also find it mind-boggling that it's not very, like you won't find an indie game stored somewhere in a museum or something, or playable.
We're getting there, I think, but it's taking a long time, and there's a lot of history that we might potentially lose, which is a shame.
Sami, because you have been traveling so much, is this kind of a general issue that, like games, are kind of, are not yet seen or allowed in more traditional arts institutions, or are there places, are there examples? Yeah.
I mean, there are examples. There's even examples in the Netherlands. But that said, it is less common at this point still. Like, I think part of it is that games have always, or for sort of like the middle part of its history, the part where it grew into a commercial behemoth, I think games really emphasized their sort of disposable commercial nature, which is a shame. Like, this is a self-marketing issue. We just went like, hey, here's the next big video game. Go play it with your friends, like do some headshots and play the next one next year, right? Like, that is an us problem. Like, we created that context around games. It's just as the medium grew, surely there should have been a point where people started talking about it and discussing this in a more artistic context. And that happened, but because by that point we'd become such an insular industry, I think it took a long while for people to take note. And I think now that we're reaching out again and we have more people in the industry that aren't just here to create the next blockbuster game, but also people that see the value of games as a human construct, as a social construct, as an artistic construct. Now that we have that, you're starting to see these reach outs across mediums, right? Games, music, games and writing, games and movies, games and physical spaces, games and museums, games as art. And I think we have a bit of making up to do in that regard, but it would really not hurt a lot of institutes to start doing that reach out themselves. And I think across the world, we're starting to see that. I have there's a project I'm doing in Colombia with a museum at the moment. There are museums around the world that are doing incredible work with games. So I think there's an evolution right there right now. There's a long way to go, and there's a lot to think about, honestly, about how we present games in a museum context. How we, you can look at a painting as long as you want, and the painting stays the same, but you can't really do that with a game. You can't just be like, well, here's a game. You can't play it or touch it or anything. Like, how do you communicate that context? And I think we might just be really difficult to work with in some ways, and as a medium, not necessarily as, maybe also as people sometimes, but mostly as a medium. And we have to figure this one out.
Yasin,
Yes.
yeah, also in relation to this, because you were talking also about reward systems, like how wonderful it is, of course, for people from diverse backgrounds, to connect. Could you add to this?
Well, part of my job at Submarine Channel is to find the proper audiences for all the projects we do. We recently launched a motion comic, Exodus, that is a wordless motion comic about people fleeing war and persecution. And what museums should really learn is to see how they can present their projects and present the material they have to the proper audiences in a proper way. So, for instance, in a museum, it would make no sense to have games stacked after one another, because it wouldn't make any sense, because a game needs your attention and you want to play with it and you want to discover it and whatsoever. And in a picture, you can stand there as long as you want, and everyone consumes a painting on a completely different way, and the same goes also for games. So I definitely think that if museums want to showcase games or game-related content, they really have to reconsider how to showcase that. So yeah, I also think it's a job of these institutions to see how they can reach people far from outside their own communities. I think if they collaborate or whatsoever, there can be a lot of great things coming up. So for instance, what is a game museum? It could also be an arcade hall where you can play the games, old school games, and actually experience them. So yeah.
So actually the game as the tool for musea. to kind of, make their progress into the world, because sometimes they are seen, and rightly seen as more like mausoleums than something else. So I need to wrap up already, but thank you so much for your contributions, for for this and sharing these possibilities together. Of course, Impossible Bodies also programmed Y Games here, because we have a wonderful game where everybody can meet, which is called the Cantina. So it's a place, a Second Life place, where everybody can fool around and play, and you will, as soon as you're there as avatar, feel that all kinds of aspects that we normally have in a physical world again kind of come to life. So please also join us in the Cantina, and for now, thank you very much for your expertise and time to talk about Y Games.